Alrighty, today we are looking to explore our common factoring skills with our polynomial expressions. This video is suitable if you are in grade 10 looking to expand your algebra skills, or in grade 11 looking to review some of your factoring skills. This common factoring is typically the most basic factoring skill that you will work with. The prerequisite skills we're going to rely on. You need to make sure you're comfortable with the distributive property, which we covered in section 6.2 of this course, and you need to make sure you're comfortable working down as we're working with our expressions quickly. Now, jumping into the review, this very first expression, I'll encourage you, pause the video here. I'll ask you to expand this. That is already using our distributive property. Pause the video here and then come back to see what it looks like. Good, so we end up with 5x plus 5, where in this case we have expanded our 5, multiplied it by our, expanded our 5, multiplied it by our x, and then we multiplied our 5 times the 1 as well. Now, I will encourage you, again, pause the video, and once you unpause, you can compare your answers for both B and C right here. Fantastic. So here we are seeing we end up with an x squared. Don't forget that squared minus 5x. And for part C, we're ending up with a 6. That comes from our two coefficients multiplying by one another. 6x squared minus 21x. Now, assuming you're feeling comfortable with that, if you're not, I encourage you jump back to video 6.2a, but otherwise, assuming you're feeling comfortable with that, what we're doing with our common factoring here, we're just looking at taking that distributive property and working with it backwards. So we're trying to begin with no brackets, that is beginning with an expression just adding up separate terms and turning it into some factors. So we're turning it into these two pieces that are multiplying together in order to get that expression. Our next section A. And we're just looking to find, hey, what is it that's missing? Well, we're familiar with this pattern. We know I would multiply the first factor by the first term of my second factor, and then by the second term of my second factor. Well, in that case, I'm multiplying something times x to get to 6x, and I'm multiplying that same thing times 1 to get to 6. Well, that seems pretty nice and straightforward. That's going to be a 6 I'm working with because 6 times x is 6x, and 6 times 1 is 6. Fantastic. So I encourage you, pause the video here, try out question B, try out question C, and find those unknown factors, unpause, and see how you did. Good. So problems like this kind of have a built-in failsafe for you to check your work, because we can look right here, we can say, okay, we need x squared. And in order to get this x squared, I'm going to need to multiply something times my x. Well, let's check. Okay, well, that would just be another x. So if that's correct, then I should be able to double check my failsafe. I should be able to multiply x times negative 3 and get my final term over here, negative 3x. Fantastic. Great job, us. You can see as well in question C, we've ended up with our common factor being that 3x, where we notice that factor can include just a coefficient or a variable or a combination of the two. Right? So if that's the case, we're going to jump forward. Now, we're taking this a little bit further. It's not just that common factor we're trying to find, it's the whole thing. But you'll notice that each of those missing factors that we just found, that 6 was a factor of 6x and was a factor of 6. That is, it shows up in both of those terms. This x shows up in both of these terms. This 3x shows up in both of these terms. I encourage you, consider here, for example, 1a, consider what is the common factor that shows up in both 3x and 6. And then we're going to take that common factor and we're going to put it right at the front. And then whatever's remaining that we'll be working with, that will go inside your brackets. I encourage you, pause the video, at least give yourself 30 seconds, a minute, see if your math brain can figure it out. If not, unpause and see how you did. Good, so we notice that we're working with 3x and 6. Common to both of those is the number 3. That is, I can divide both of those terms by 3. So if I divide my first term by 3, I end up with just x. If I divide my second term by 3, I end up with 2. What kind of a 2? A positive 2, so it's going to be a plus sign that goes inside the brackets. Congratulations, you just common factored your first expression. I want you to consider example 1b. Try and find the factor that's common to both of these terms and come up with both factors in the same format. We'll end up with one factor times a set of brackets with two factors inside. Pause the video, see how you do. Good, so when x is common to both terms right here, where we can divide, if I divide this first term x squared by x, I end up with an x. if I divide my second term, my negative 9x, by this first x, then I would end up with negative 9 minus 9. So I'm working with x times x minus 9. Again, pause the video here, try out example 1c. Good, now you might find something like a common factor of 2, or you might find something like a common factor of x, again, just like we did in 1b, or like 8, rather. Let's take a look. Let's say the first one that we find right here is just the x. Okay, if I common factor out an x, then I'll end up here with 24x minus 8. And that's great. That is mathematically correct, but it is not fully common factored. So let's take a look again at what's remaining inside our brackets. Do these two terms share a factor? Yeah, absolutely. They share either a 2 or a 4 or even an 8. Now, we're looking for the greatest number that we can. If I just found a 2, I'd have to double check and see if there was anything else left in there. Let's say I find the 8, then I bring the 8 out front, so I'm working with 8x, and then I divide my first term here by 8. Okay, well, then I'm working with 3x, don't forget that x, minus 8. Well, nice and easy, I'm going to divide that by 8, so that's minus 1. Good job, us. This part in brackets, we cannot factor any further because these two terms do not share any common factors. We're finished. And at that point, to be honest, you folks are nice and ready for the practice work. I encourage you, jump into question 1, jump into question 2. You should be able to handle it. All of the answers are included. Nice work, folks.